Today we're going to make a jigsaw title sequence using Blender. Guys, welcome to CG Cowboy. I'm Dale Forbes, and today we're going to do a title sequence where we have a flyby across seemingly random jigsaw puzzle pieces and then ultimately pull back to reveal that these pieces are part of something larger. Now there's so many ways that you could use this approach. In fact, I'm doing this for a corporate video, but here are a couple examples. This first example is actually what you just saw. Here I use pictures of my daughters and then ultimately pull back and reveal their initials. So in this case, we're using text. And this is exactly what we'll walk through in the tutorial. In the second example, it's the same exact concept, but I just use pictures of flags where then we ultimately pull back and reveal a completely different image and not text, just to show another way of doing this. Now guys, this is a longer tutorial, so I broke it up into a couple of parts. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on things like the materials or even the surroundings around the title sequence. We're really focused here on creating the pieces, cutting them out, and then setting up the scene and getting the animation just right, just like you just saw in the examples. Alright, so just before we get started, just a couple of things, guys. I used a collage, right, for the sequence, this jigsaw. There are countless ways to do this. You see the sisters version here, which I'm going to be covering in this tutorial. And then there was the flag concept. Now, if you want to create the collage, I'm not going to walk through the process of creating it, and you don't have to create a collage. Do whatever kind of image you want yours to look like. But I'm going to be using the collage, and just to give you a couple options, what I did was I found, I didn't use this, but Dan Fitzgerald has a really nice version of a collage that I think would work well here. So I'll put this link in the description. But what I ended up doing was I found this site. I was just looking for a free site to just do a quick and dirty collage for illustration purposes. And this worked really, really well. I was impressed. So you have a lot of options, but you basically import a bunch of photos. You dragging them and dropping over to your mat here, and there's even a bunch of options to change the configuration from your border, etc. And then of course your final resolution, the dimensions of your image. The only thing that I recommend is you just make sure that if you do use this option, you just want to make sure that your dimensions of the collage match to whatever your final image is going to be in your jigsaw title sequence. So in the sisters, 1920 by 1080, and so this is the flag one, but in the sisters it was just that 1920 by 1080. And then the one other thing you're going to need if you want to follow along is you're going to need this mesh. So what I did was, I used, in order to create the jigsaw pieces and separate them and everything, I cut a mesh with another mesh using the Boolean modifier, and we'll walk through that. But in order to do that, I had to actually create a special mesh. And it looks like this. So I'm going to put a link for you to download, and you'll see that in Gumroad here. So there's no charge, of course, for this, and frankly, one of the reasons is I don't like to charge for this. But another thing is, this isn't the cleanest thing in the world. So this was created by importing a vector graphic. So I went on to, Pixabay. And I found this vector graphic that's in the jigsaw shape, which was awesome. And then within Blender, what you can do is you can do an import of scalable vector graphics, and it imports it as a curve. You do need the add-on enabled, and let's just see. Oh, perfect. I have it here. So you have import, export, scalable vector graphics, so an SVG, etc. And as long as that's enabled, then you have that import option. Now, this is not a small file. This is a 12 meg file, and it's not that pretty, but it works. So the ironic thing was, as much as I tried to retopologize this, the less effective it became as a tool for cutting the shapes. But if you do feel like playing around with this yourself, I have the raw curve here that is created by doing that import. If you want to go ahead and create that, this is in the blend file. And then I also actually spent some time trying to turn the edges into more of a one-dimensional type edge, thinking that that was going to improve the mesh as an effective cutter, but it just didn't. But I'll leave it here in case you want to play around with it. And yeah, we're just going to use this first version, and so we'll refer to this later on by appending it. All right, let's finally get started here. All right, first thing we're going to do, surprise, surprise, we're going to kill a cube, and we're also going to delete the lights. We're actually not going to use any lights. This is going to be a very, very simple concept here that you can build on in your own idea of complexity and all that good stuff. All right, I did numpad 7, and we want to go to numpad 5 to go to top ortho view, and let's add our text. Now I'm going to recreate the sisters version, so I'm going to go ahead and tab in edit mode, just do SA, and let's go ahead and scale this way up. So we'll go to the text tab, and let's go to size. We'll scale it up, we'll center it, scale it up a little bit more, and good for size. But let's change the font. So what we want to do is we want to go to a font. Now, by the way, in my bookmarks, I have my fonts here because you go to it so often if you do text. And check the display mode here so we can see what we're looking at. For the font, I want something kind of thick, right? We're going to cut this up. So we don't want some skinny little font that's not really going to work as far as cutting it into pieces. So I'm going to keep it simple and go to Arial Black. You can get a little bit more creative if you want, but we'll keep it simple here for now. That's pretty good. And then I also want to bring the text a little closer together. So let's go to the spacing. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to slide it to the left until they're just touching. And that's, whoops, let's go, just touching. That's pretty good right there. All right. And the last thing I'm going to do, you know what, let's size it up just a little bit more. And my size, come on, come on. Okay, that's as high as you want to go, 10. What if I said 12? All right, let's do 12. So I guess you can slide it up to 10, but then you can manually go beyond that. That works. All right, so extruding, I do want to create some thickness here. So I get a nice view of the edge, and I'm going to extrude it. Now I'm going to extrude it beyond what the final result is going to be, and that's only because when I cut this, I get a much more successful result if I've got a little bit thicker. If I think my final result is going to look probably like this, no. Let's go ahead and make it a little thicker. We'll shape it down a little bit more later on. And then that's pretty much it on the text side. It's time to convert this to a mesh so we can start doing some real modeling here. So I'm going to Alt-C, convert to mesh from curve, metasurf, text. And now if I tab into edit mode, now I see Blender did the best it could at converting this to a mesh. But the first thing I'm going to do, we're going to clean this up a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit A until all the vertices are selected. And I'm going to say remove doubles. And there you can see 674 vertices were removed just from doing that alone. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to try to get rid of as many of these lines on the faces as I can. That's going to help me in a couple places. And one is when I put a material on it, the more lines you have in the geometry here, the more artifacts you can get within the image itself. So you may see some of these lines kind of cutting through your image, and you want to avoid that. So in order to just grab the lines that are on the faces, both front and back, and not the edges, because I don't want to mess with the edges. The Blender did a nice job of converting my text into some smooth edges here, so I don't want to play with those lines. So I'm going to go ahead and go into front ortho mode. So hit numpad 1, A until nothing is selected. And I want to uncheck my limit selection. So now I'm selecting all the way through the mesh, not just what I'm seeing. Whoops, go into line select mode first. And I'm going to hit B for box select, select just the middle part. And now I have all the way through everything that's on the edges. Now, why did I do that? Because if that was easy to select, first of all, and then all I have to do is Control I, and it gives me the invert of that selection. So now I have all of the face lines. So what I want to do here is there are a couple options, really only one really only one option, but it's clear to understand why that's different. So I can't just delete the edges. That's obviously not going to work. I'll Control Z out of that. I also can't dissolve the edges because I'll get these weird boundary region. It can't recreate the faces effectively by doing that. So if I do a limited dissolve, then it does its best to try to maintain my geometry. And you can see it still left a couple lines out here, and it needed to in order to maintain the geometry here on the A. But that's so much cleaner. I mean, there are no lines on the faces left on the S. And after we do our cut on the A and the S with the jigsaw pieces, then we'll actually be able to take care of these as well. But this should work out really well. And it may look a little bit differently depending on the font, depending on the letters that you actually chose. So if you didn't do SA and you're doing your own version, then it may be a little different, but the steps should be the same. So before we do anything else, we're going to tab back into object mode and we're going to duplicate this. So Shift D, I'm going to escape. I do a lot of, like if I do an act like that, an action. So I'm going to do a G for grab, and I'm moving it around just to show, hey, I got another piece here, but I don't want to actually move it. So I hit escape a lot. For some reason, it's not recorded here on my keystrokes, but I'll try to say that as much as I can. I'm going to move, M for move, and I'll move it to layer 3. So we're going to keep the solid version of this on layer 3 here. All right, so I'll go back to number 1, layer 1. And let's go ahead and do our cut, right? So I'm going to do, whoops, not insert. I'm going to 1. I don't know what insert's going to do, so I'm going to hit that again. Sorry, numpad 7. Get into top ortho. Now I'm going to do Shift F1, or I do hotkeys a lot, and I encourage you to too, but I'm doing this append right here. So Shift F1, and I'm going to go find my cutter. Now, wherever you downloaded it, that's where we're going. If you downloaded it, if you created your own, use that. And if you downloaded mine, you go to the objects, and then remember I said I've got the raw curve there if you want to play with it. I also have the version with it's a mesh, but it has more of the one-dimensional lines. That's there too. But the one we're going to cut with is that first one on layer 1, which is called Jigsaw Cutter Mesh. So grab that. It pulls it in. I'm going to scale it up, move it around a little bit, scale it, and now I'm going to go into wireframe mode. So I hit Z, and the reason is I want to see my letters as well as the cutter, and I want to just line it up a little bit. So, you know, we're going for, in the title sequence, we're going to zoom into some of the pieces, and those pieces are going to have full images on them. I just want to try to move it around and scale it to a point where I have full or almost full size jigsaw pieces covered with the letters. It's probably not that important. Maybe I'm being a little anal here, but that's just kind of the process I'm going through. If you want smaller and more higher number of pieces, then of course you can scale this down. You're just going to want to cover your letters, of course, or you could duplicate that mesh, right? I mean, we could go ahead and we could just cover one. You can rotate it around, and let's just cut the S. We could duplicate it. Now let's cut the A. You know, you could do whatever you want here, but no, I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this back and have some larger pieces for demonstration purposes. So let's go with something like this. Let's try this one. All right, so now I'm going to hit Z again to get back into solid view, and I need to move my cutter. I'm just going to keep calling it a cutter, guys. I'm going to hit G, Z to move it along the Z axis so it's completely covering, going through my letters, both top and on the bottom. Is it covering? Just barely, actually, huh? I'm going to move it down just a little bit more. And I left my letters kind of thick, maybe even a little thicker than I needed to, but we'll just go with that. Now I'm covered on top and bottom. Now I select the letters, and I add a Boolean modifier. So add Boolean, and sorry. Now for this operation, remember I said this is not the cleanest mesh in the world, right? But what tends to happen, or what tends to work the most, is the intersect operation for when I try to do this cut. Now this is going to take a few seconds, so I'm going to select my object. Boom, I just selected it, and now I got to wait a little bit, and I'm actually going to keep the recording going, and I'll know it's done when this field gets filled in with my Jigsaw cutter mesh object. And you can see about how long, at least on my computer, it's going to take. And if I see all my letters intact, then I'll know it's worked. Now it's just showed up. So you see, what was that, 10, 12 seconds, something like that? So yeah, it's a lot of mesh. It's a lot of calculations trying to figure out those cuts. Now, for some reason, you just went through this and your letters disappeared, but you've got where the intersect was happening on the cutter is highlighted. That means this operation didn't quite work, and it could just be where the cutter is positioned on your letters, where the mesh, where the vertices are intersecting each other. And in that case, if that happened to you, if you got my result, then you're good. So don't do this step. But if it did happen to you, then you just want to change this to difference, and for whatever reason it tends to work, and then you should end up looking like this and still seeing your letters. Now we're here, so we're going to go ahead and hit apply, which is going to complete our cut. And I'll wait again, keep the recording going. It should just take about the same amount of time. And you may get, not responding up here, and that's because it's doing a lot of calculations. And I'll know it's done because this modifier will actually just disappear since we applied it. And there we go. That wasn't too bad. Just a perfect amount of talking there. All right, so now that we know it's done, we can actually select the cutter and delete it. So hit X to delete, and there you go. Now you see we just cut all these lines, these curved jigsaw pieces, into our mesh. Awesome. Now what I should have done before I went through all that calculating is I should have saved it. So I'm going to do Control S, and let's go ahead and save this guy. Jigsaw title, whoops, sequence. All right. Now since we just did a pretty hefty calculation or remodeling, almost like a remeshing of this, I'm going to go into edit mode, so tab in edit mode, and I'm going to hit A until everything is selected, and I'm going to do remove doubles again. Sure enough, 4 vertices, not bad at all, but 4 vertices were deleted just from doing a remove. And now what I can do is if I tab back into edit mode, I'm going to say limit my selection. Let's hit A just to unselect everything. And now I can take another stab at these lines that might be still remaining. So I'm going to select the line, so I'm in line select mode. I'm going to hold shift, I'm going to select this one, this one, this one, and I don't need to go nuts here. This guy, again, holding down shift, selecting my lines. And do I have any others? Looks like that's it. Now I do a limited dissolve on those, and now it successfully is able to dissolve those lines and still maintain those faces on the mesh. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to create just a very, very slight bevel in just the first part of this, just first part, the top part. So I'm going to go into numpad 7 top ortho mode, and I want to make sure this limit selection is actually on, and I'm going to go into face select. I hit A to unselect everything. And what this will do is it'll allow me to select only these front faces and not select anything else. I'm just interested in the front faces. So I'm going to hit C for circle select. I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel until it goes really big and just quickly select everything here. Escape out of that. And now you can see I only have the faces selected on the front, nothing on the back. And this is where I'm going to create my bevel. So I'm going to go into line select mode, and I'm going to kind of zoom in a little close here. And now what I'm going to do is I just want to do a very, very subtle bevel, just so I don't have, ridiculously perfectly sharp edges. So I'm going to hit Control B, And before I move my mouse, I'm going to hold down my shift key so I can make very, very subtle changes. And I'm pulling out just a little bit, and you can see just a little bit of a bevel, and that's enough right there. But I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel up once and maybe one more time, just to add extra cuts into that bevel to make it a little bit smoother. And then I click. Now it's set. Now if I tab back into object mode, you can see I've got a little bit of a bevel on the edge. Now you see inside we have, it's not smooth, right? You see the faces on there. That's okay. You're not going to see that for this. This does not have to be smoothed out. In fact, you don't want to use smooth shading here because it'll mess everything up. So, but for this title sequence, this works just fine. Now what could have happened is when you were making that bevel, in fact, no, let's just, before we do anything else, we just added more vertices, right? Tab into edit mode, hit A until everything is selected, and then do another remove doubles. And sure enough, there you go. Just adding the bevel, we had a couple of doubles, 4 in this case, so it got rid of those. Now, what also may have happened, I just tab back into object mode, is it may have kind of created some vertice positions where you're supposed to have a cut and it's overlapping. It looks like mesh is suddenly overlapping because you've got some weird artifacts in there. Now, luckily, I don't see any here. It looks like it was pretty clean. But yeah, what you'll want to do is, if you see that, you got a couple options. You can go and attack the vertices. If you see some artifact over here, then go into vertices select and try to, oops, didn't click it, and just try to move things around until it gets fixed. Or the other option that's a little bit easier, but a little bit riskier, is you do a remove doubles. So you select everything, do a remove doubles, and if it doesn't get rid of it, then you just change your merge distance. And I usually start with 0.001 because the default is 0.0001. Change it to 0.001 and do it, and you can see removed a whole bunch of doubles. In this case, I don't want to, so I'm going to change it back. Remove 0. But yeah, you just have to just play around with your doubles. If 0.001 doesn't work, try 0.002, then 3, then 4. But if you start getting too high, then it just totally reshapes everything, and that doesn't work very well. So now we got a pretty clean mesh, and let's go ahead, and now that we're done with our cutting, let's thin this guy out. So I'm gonna do SZ to scale along the Z-axis, and you know that's pretty good right there. Let's go ahead and do the solid version of this same one. So select it, SZ. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. We're just going to eyeball it here, and that's pretty good. And yeah, now they're both the same. Now we basically have the same letters. We have a cut version, we have a solid version, and we're going to need both of those in the end. So let's go ahead and UV unwrap this. So I'm going to do top ortho, so numpad 7. Pull this guy out to give me another window. I'm going to hit T in this window, T in this window to get rid of my sidebar. A little more room to work with. Open the UV image editor over here, and then let's open, in my case, the collage. So I have the Sisters collage. If you created your own, then this is when you want to open it. And then we can see it here. Again, this is 1920 by 1080. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to do 50%, just do 100%. In my render. But anyway, this is 1920 by 1080. So now if I select my mesh, I'm at top ortho. I'm going to have the face is going to be one material, and the sides and the back are going to be another material. So I'm just worried about the face. So let's just look at it. Even though this is 3-dimensional, we're looking at it head on, and tab into edit mode. Everything is selected. U for UV unwrap, and project from view with bounds. Project from view bounds. And that is going to fill up my mesh, and at the same time keep the proportions of my letters. Now of course, by doing this, you're not going to have everything that's on your collage is going to overlap with your mesh, and that's okay. If you wanted to move it around a little bit and say, well, you know, I want to make sure that picture's right there, and I want to make sure this picture's over here, this is the time to do this. Just make sure that you remember, if I go outside like this, then it's just going to overlap, right? It's gonna, what do you call it? Anyway, it's gonna, whatever my line cut off here, it's gonna tile it. So it's gonna start back over here. So the bottom of the letters are gonna be cut off by, or overlapped, sorry, with the material that I'm looking at here in that image. And everything above this edge is gonna start right here. So this Hamilton picture would be, you know, right around here. So in my case, I'm just gonna do a U, project from view with bounds, and just be done with it right there. Yeah. And then while I'm at it, I want to go ahead and go to my solid one. Same thing, edit mode. A till I select everything. U, project from view with bounds. And now I should have the exact same mapping on both my solid and my cut version. So let's go ahead and put materials on here. I'm going to drag this over to close it. And let's pull this up, and we're going to turn this into the node editor. So I'm going to do Shift F3 because, again, I like the shortcuts. And we're not going to do fancy things with the materials. We're just going to go for what's effective here. So I'm going to do a new material, and you know what? I'm still selecting. Look at this. I'm still selecting the solid one. So let me go. I'm going to select this one. So that has my solid version actually has that material on it, which we just deleted. Select this guy, new. Now it's got the material I want. And I'm gonna delete my diffuse, and I'm gonna add an emission shader. And because I'm using Node Wrangler, and you should too, I'm gonna click my emission shader. I'm gonna do Control T. Puts my texture coordinate in, my mapping, my image texture, perfect. And since I already opened my collage image in the UV image editor, it still has it here, so I can just select that. And I'm only going to want, again, that collage on those front faces. So let's go ahead and rename the material SA Collage. And I'm going to go into top orthographic mode, pull this down, pull it down if I can grab it. There we go. Edit, A to unselect everything, limit my selection. I'm in top ortho, not perspectives, because I only want to select my faces. C for circle select, select everything again, escape out, and do an assign, and that's going to assign the collage just to those faces. Awesome. Now let's go ahead and do a Control I. Now it's going to select everything else, and let's create our other material. Plus for another material, new, we'll call this SA back. And the only thing we're going to put here is a diffuse material, and we're just going to make it gray, and that's it. And now, because I have everything but my front faces selected, I can do an assign, tab into object mode, and now if I look at this, pull this down, mouse troubles today. Now if I look at this in material view, boom, now I have my collage on the front, I have the gray diffuse on the back and on the edges. Excellent. And just to be consistent, let's go ahead and do the solid version, top ortho, so numpad 7, select it, tab into edit mode, circle select only these front faces, and I really don't care about the lines in this one, so not to worry. Now I'm going to, I don't need to create a new material here, I just need to go ahead and select the SA Collage, assign, Control I to invert my selection. Now I need to add my SA back and assign. So now, same thing, solid version and cut version of the exact same thing. And before we do anything else, I'm going to do a Control S and save this guy. And now we start to really get into the fun part. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to rotate this guy along the X. Whoops, select it first. That's the one thing you got to be careful about. So I had just worked on this solid view, right? I go to layer 1 and I want to work on this guy, and I'm wondering why it's not responding. And that's because I'm still selected on layer 3. I don't know, something I forget once in a while. Anyway, so now I've selected this guy, rotate X 90, so it's standing up. This is how we're going to work with it. And what the heck, let's just go ahead and do it to the solid guy, RX 90. All right, now what we need to do is we need to separate this into all its different separate pieces. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to select it, we're going to tab into edit mode, and I'm going to hit A until everything is selected, and I'm going to do a P to separate by loose parts. It's going to take a few seconds because there's a lot of vertices in here again, and not long. So there you go. Now I'm going to tab back into object mode, and now if I select each one of these, you can see each one is a separate selection. I can move it around, escape. I don't want to keep it there, move it around. So yeah, so I'm good to go. Now the other thing I need to do is I need to make sure that each one has its own origin point at its geometry. Because each one of these pieces was all cut from this one mesh, it still shares this one origin point way down here. So now what I need to do is I can't just hit A to select everything, because that selects all. Now these are all separate objects. If I hit A to select everything, it's going to select my camera and anything else that's in the scene. So now what I need to do is I need to box select everything, make sure all my letters are selected but nothing else. And the shortcut key here is, well, let me just show you this here first. I could set origin to geometry right here, or Control Shift Alt C, origin to geometry. And now you can see each one of these has its own origin point right in the middle, and that's what we need. And then the next thing we need to do is now we need to move these things all around, right? Now we need to move them away from each other and have that starting point. So I could go ahead and just take this one, move it here, take this one, move it here, this one, move it here. That would be tedious. There's going to be enough tedious steps in this tutorial, but that's not one we need to do. So I'm going to Control Z back to where they belong, and I'm going to box select all the pieces again. And then check this out. Object, transform, randomize transform. It brings up this randomize transform over here. And there are several things that we could randomize. And we're only going to do one. But this is a really, really cool shortcut. Now, we want to randomize the location. We don't want to randomize the rotation. We're not going to turn things around. You can see them turn around. This is just cool. I could see a whole bunch of uses for this. I'm going to escape out of that. We're not going to randomize the rotation or the scale, which would also be cool, but not in this case. We're going to randomize the location, but only the y-axis. So I'm going to slide the y-axis out and check it out. That is just freaking cool. We just need a starting point. All right, so scale it out. Don't get nuts, because we're still going to be timing the camera movements, and we don't want to take a ton of time as we move from one piece to the other. But I'm going to just get maybe just slightly smaller than the grid here, and that's a good starting point. And you can either change them around more by randomizing the seed. You know, just see what kind of feels good as a starting point. We'll just go with that right there. But it doesn't matter, because we're going to move things around manually even a little bit more to fit the steps in the title sequence itself. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm going to do, just like in the video that you saw, I'm going to do three zooms, right? So I went out and grabbed 3 images that I want to zoom to, and they're not in or they may be in the collage, but I came up with 3 different images that I want to go ahead and apply to the 3 pieces that I want to zoom to. So if we go back to the video, you see this was a 3rd one, there's a 2nd one, but if I just use the images in the collage, it's not really going to work very well. So I have to go and reapply materials to here. So I found these 3 images, and now I got to find the pieces that I want to zoom to. And if I think about how I want, the flow of this to go, I'll do, I'll come in from the right, I'll come over to the left and stop at another. So I'll stop at a piece over here, then I'll stop at another piece over here, and then maybe another piece over here, and then finish off by doing the final reveal. So what I want to do is find images that are conducive to, find pieces that are conducive to the images that I want to start with. So if you look at my first zoom image, it looks like this. So I need kind of something that's a little bit more horizontal than vertical, right? Same with this one, more of a horizontal piece to fit this image in here, but then this one is more of a vertical piece. So just knowing that I'm coming in from the right, then I want to come over any piece on the right hand side that's kind of horizontal and use that guy. Now, what am I seeing here? Let's go with, wow, they're all very vertical. Let's go with this guy right here. Now he's in the front. Is that really going to work? Well, yeah, because we're just going to move him back. As long as we move him along the y-axis, we're perfectly fine. So we're going to move him toward the back, and this one's kind of too close, so we're going to move him toward the front. We really don't care where they start, because we're going to make sure they all end in the right place. So feel free to move these as much as you need. Just make sure you move them along the y-axis. So we'll start here. Let's get that one out of the way too. And I don't want to lose track of this piece, so I'm going to go here to the properties, and I'm going to show the name, and I'm going to make that name zoom 1. Whoops, zoom, forgot the 1. And that way, when I'm looking at my viewport, I can just kind of spot it at a glance. Now let's go ahead and swing to the other side just for the heck of it, and let's find another horizontal piece for zoom 2. And you know what? I don't like the material view for this actually. Whoops. Let's go to the solid view. And let's take a look at this guy. Is actually not bad right here. So I'm going to go find you. Now zoom 1, I can see it's over here. I'm going to come and swing them to this side. For zoom 2, let's call it zoom 2. And then a vertical piece on the other side for zoom 3. Let's go with, let's try this guy. Why not? Alright, so where's zoom 2? Zoom 2 is, whoops, what did I do with zoom 2? Did I check that off or not? I didn't, did I? That's not it. This is it, zoom 2. I forgot to check the display name. Alright, see, that's exactly why I want to check those boxes. Alright, so what did we find? Let's go with, you know what, I actually kind of like this guy. I don't know what I was looking at before, but I kind of like this guy. So I'm going to do this, zoom 3, make sure I check the display the name, and now I can see all of them. And then I want to make sure this one is the far right, because it's going to be the far back. This one's a little bit more forward, and then this one's a little bit more toward the front. And then the final reveal will look from this view here. Awesome. Alright, so let's go to the first zoom, and I'm going to use an empty in order to control a lot of things. So I'm going to put an empty on here first. So I'm going to do a Shift A. I'm going to add no, you know what? First I'm going to do a Shift S, because I want to put my cursor there. Cursor to selected, moved my 3D cursor there, and now when I add my empty, it's going to add it right where my cursor is, which is right where I want to start. Perfect. And I'm going to call this empty focus, because I'm going to use this empty for a few things, including where I want the camera to be and where I want the camera to look, mainly where I want it to look. Alright, so let's pull the timeline up here, because we're about to start animating. I don't know how many frames excuse me, I'm going to end up with, but so we'll keep it at 250, which is the default, and we'll figure it out as we go. But before we get into the animating, I want to go ahead and put the appropriate materials on my zoom pieces. So I'm going to select zoom 1, and just to make sure that in the viewport I'm focused on that, I'm going to hit period on the numpad. Greatest shortcut ever. I don't know how many times when I was first getting started with Blender, I'd be trying to zoom in on something. I'm like, why can't this go any further? And it was because I was actually focused on the wrong thing. So yeah, as soon as I learned, hey, just use numpad period, I'm like, oh, this is just the greatest thing ever. All right, so let's go ahead and do numpad 1 to go into front ortho mode. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to do face select, keep my limit selection on, and let's go ahead and look at my material. So actually I should have left my node editor down here, shift F3, and go to my materials. Let's open up T, get rid of the sidebar, my UV image editor, and I'm going to open up my first zoom piece. So zoom 1 looks like this. And now if I do a, you know what, let's go ahead and hit A couple times, select everything, U, project from view, and now if I look at my material mode, oh, that's not going to work. I need to change the material first. I don't want this to be the collage material. I'm going to make a copy of the collage by hitting the plus, naming it SA Zoom 1, and then changing the image here to be Zoom 1. Now, if I want to scale this up, I can see it's not the greatest piece to use, but I can kind of see how I want this to look. That's yeah, definitely not the best piece, but I'm gonna go with it. You can select whatever pieces work for your images, but yeah, let's just go with this. All right, so that one's done. I'm gonna tab back in object mode. Let's go find zoom 2. That's right here. I really like the idea of having those names on there. Numpad period to make sure I'm there. Front select, numpad 1, front view. And then now again, I want to go to my materials. I'm going to hit plus to make a copy of the collage material. And by making a copy of that one, it keeps the setup and also keeps the fact that it's assigned just to those front faces. So let's call this one SA Zoom 2. And then we're going to open in the UV image editor, Zoom 2. And then that makes Zoom 2 available here. Now, hit tab into edit mode, hit A a couple times, project from view, move it around, scale it, and yeah, let's go with that right there. That's good. Tab into object mode, and of course what's going to happen is my collage image isn't going to match exactly to my zoom pieces, but that's okay. I mean, for these purposes, I think it's perfectly fine. It does not take away from the effect, in my opinion. Now I'll go to zoom 3, period, front, open up my zoom 3 image, go to my material, the collage, plus to make a copy, SA Zoom 3, open up Zoom 3 here, and for some reason, I don't know if it's just vertical images, but it keeps rotating it in my viewport. So what happens is when I hit edit to go into edit mode, tab to go into edit mode, hit A, U, project from view. If I just scale this up, it's sideways. So not a problem. All I need to do is rotate it 90 degrees minus to make it upright if you have that same problem, and you're good to go. So we'll go with, let's go with that Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. Let's go with this right here. Move it a little bit more. Good. Thanks for hanging in there for part 1, guys. There's a link in the description to part 2 where we get into the animation side of things and finish this off.